Good evening, everybody, and welcome. We'd like to ask you to please take your seats. Okay. Let's see, is this hot? Okay. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for coming here this evening. My name is Maria Shriver, and I am here as the honorary chair of this evening for the Kennedy School, the Institute of Politics' first venture out to California. Wow. Actually, I was with a group of people today, and we were talking about moving beyond labels, moving beyond expectation, moving beyond the traditional political discourse. And I thought that was an appropriate way to begin because the Kennedy School has actually moved beyond Boston, New York, out here to California. Baby steps. This is a big step for Harvard to come out here. I didn't go to Harvard, went to Georgetown, but I know many of the people here went to Harvard. And so we welcome you to California. And I think the hope here of everybody, this is, I think, very fitting that this evening be on International Women's Day, because women have been so much at the forefront of the last couple of weeks of the political discourse. And I think it's also fitting that so little of the discourse is actually about what women need in their lives and where women are in their lives, and the fact that 54% of the voting population is women, and women will probably decide who becomes the next president of the United States. So I hope that we'll be able to, I'm also so glad that there's a woman on the panel. And keep talking. No, anyway. But I hope that David was asking, I think, what was the hope for this panel this evening, and I jumped in and said, I hope that this panel will begin to move beyond what so many of us see on television, so what so many of us hear on radio, and everybody up here is an incredible voice in politics, and I think all of us are longing for a conversation that moves beyond screaming, moves beyond fighting, and actually illuminates what's going on in the country. There's a hunger for that, I think, certainly here in California, about how we can be involved in the process. So often California is written off because people always just think it's democratic and, well, I don't even have to come here. But there are a lot of incredible minds here and a lot of longing for, I think, an impassioned and smart conversation about where this country is going, who the people who are running for president of the United States, what they actually think and how they can impact people's lives. And particularly, I'm interested in the lives of women who are primary caretakers, breadwinners, and parents in the majority of American families. And there's really nobody speaking to a lot of those issues. So I would be interested in beginning in that way. And I hope that this is the first of many ventures out here to California, because as I always say, so goes California, so goes the rest of the nation. So welcome to California. And I want to, once again, this is a really big audience. I know this is the Kennedy School was saying this is the biggest audience that you guys have ever had. And I think it just speaks to all of the people here. And they had to come from far away, beat the traffic, to come out here to the beach and listen to all of you. So I hope you make it worth their while. So thank you.
No pressure for us up here on stage, huh? Thanks, Maria, for hosting us and for you and your colleagues at the Open Field who worked so hard to make this such a successful event. I will say that when we did this forum on the road in New York, we didn't have this many people. So California beats New York, right? Well, my name is Trey Grayson, and I am the director of the Institute of Politics at the Kennedy School at Harvard. And I want to welcome everybody to tonight's forum on the road. This wouldn't be possible without the Open Field, the Harvard Kennedy School alumni, folks who are here in abundance, as well as my colleagues at the IOP. And this is just, we're really excited to have this all-star panel. When I posted on my Facebook page, on my Twitter feed, who this panel was going to be, all these people were like, what network is this going to be on? I'm like, sorry. We are going to archive this and put it on the internet, so others will get to participate. But you guys are going to get to hear and see these folks live. And I want to do brief introductions. You have on your programs more detailed biographies, but to my immediate left, David Axelrod, Senior Strategist to the President of the United States. David has promised to reveal specifically the campaign strategy between now and Election Day.
Until you said you were posting the whole thing.
Yes. So I messed up. Sorry about that. To his immediate left, Lois Romano is most recently now with Politico, previously with the Newsweek Daily Beast, and was with the Washington Post. Also was an Institute of Politics fellow. To her immediate left, Matthew Dowd, who would like to be known, he is an independent now. Matthew has worked for both Democrats and Republicans, and I think what will be interesting as we dive into the discussion, in 2000 and 2004 was a senior strategist for President Bush, and one of the things I'd like for him and for David to discuss is what it's like running for re-election compared to running the first time. And then and so Matthew. And on the far left, for the first time ever, Alex Castellanos, who has been a longtime Republican media strategist. As he said, he's now retired and is a talking head and does corporate communications. His new company is called Purple Strategies, so that gives you an idea of the kind of work that they do. We've seen Alex on CNN, and he actually worked with Mitt Romney's campaign 4 years ago, so he has some insights into that. So why don't we dive in?
For Alex.
Yeah. What I thought we'd do for today, I want to begin with the assumption that, and we'll talk a little bit about the primary, but let's begin for the purpose of the discussion that Mitt Romney's going to be the Republican nominee. But let's talk a little bit about the primary. And Maria, when she made her introduction, talked about the role of women and women's issues. There's been a lot of discussion of different women's issues over the last few weeks. And if you look at some of the polling data that has come out in the primary, it's been interesting. There's a gender gap between Romney and Santorum, but there also looks to be a growing gender gap for the Republicans and the Democrats. And in past presidential cycles, when the Republicans have a big gender gap problem, they lose in November. And when it's narrower, they win. So why don't we throw that out to the panel. Matthew, let's start with you. About some of the issues that have been brought up in the last few weeks and the role that women are playing right now in the primary and then might play in the general.
We could have a whole hour and 20 minutes on that deal. Obviously, as Maria said, women have become the key swing, to many degrees, the key swing group in most all the elections, off-year elections and midterms and presidential elections, and that number is only going to increasingly grow. I mean, they make all the buying decisions in the household. They make now most of the voting decisions, so it's key. I think that we've entered this the whole reference point is on the social conservative conversation, which unfortunately has allowed us to go to default into the thing that most of us can't stand, which is the name calling, the bitterness, even I think, in my view, the term war on women I don't think is a good, anytime we use the term war associated with politics, I think is a bad part of the discourse, because I think war should be used for the last thing that we all want, which is an actual war. And I think when we say that, it hurts the entire political discourse. Mitt Romney doesn't want this to be about social issues. I mean, he definitely doesn't want this because it highlights a couple of key weaknesses he has. First, he's been sort of all over the map on those issues in the course of his 2 runs for president. And I actually don't think, and David can answer this, the president doesn't really want to be talking about social issues in the midst of all the other major things that we have going on. Obviously, the president will speak to it, but this is a debate that I didn't ever think we would be talking about contraception in the middle of a presidential contest. And speaking to that point, I said this yesterday. I don't understand why we think the discussion of contraception and of availability of it is only a women's issue, actually. I know there's a lot of men out there that are very concerned about contraception. Probably more so than some women out there that are concerned about contraception.
How many kids do you have?
What I have 4.
Yeah.
And I have 10 brothers and sisters, so there was no real conversation about contraception.
So 4 is an improvement, yeah.
But to me, the whole thing of this issue, unfortunately, has devolved and allowed the political discourse, because of those issues, into a place that I don't think most of us really think is good for the entire conversation going around in the country. I just think it causes people on the far left and the far right to sort of enter a battle that the people in the middle have no concept of why we're having this conversation. They're like, well, of course why were we worrying about this issue? Why are we worrying about that issue? But it defaults into that. It makes good fodder for cable television shows, and I think it's really unfortunate.
Lois, you've been on the campaign trail. You go in and you were in Ohio last week covering the campaign. You spent some time with Romney. What explains the gender gap between that Romney's benefiting from right now in the primary? Is it something that maybe in the fall when he comes around that he may be a candidate that's more appealing to women?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with what Matt was talking about. I think the Republicans have allowed themselves, and Romney included, to get so caught up in these issues about contraception, and it does go to women's rights. And last week, the week before, Rush Limbaugh didn't do the Republicans any favors at all. And I don't think the Republicans are realizing that 93% of women use contraception and 90% of Catholics do. So I think the whole conversation hurt the Republicans and it got off of the issues. Romney, actually, of all of the group, is doing a little better with women. Santorum is not doing very well with women. I think the conversation can turn around if the dialogue can. I mean, right now, I'm not sure it can until the primaries are over. But I think in the fall, Romney is we assume he's the nominee. He's a family man. I think, what I've read about him, he's actually done well in some areas with women. But if we can get the conversation back on issues, maybe the gender gap would kind of level out a little bit.
Alex, if you were advising Romney in this campaign, again, we only have an hour and now 15 minutes. He'd be doing better, according to how would you be advising him to handle this?
I would advise him not to be against sex because it's popular.
I teed that one up for you.
I think Republicans, I think, have had a rough month because it's not just it's an issue about women's health and sex. It's sometimes Republicans lunge at the opportunity to appear unreasonable, and I think sometimes that that doesn't seem to play all that well. I know Republicans are not against contraception. We have the adulterous candidates to prove it, but but it is not just an issue thing. It is tone. It is open-mindedness. It is tolerance for other people's point of view. When we were talking about religious freedom, I think Republicans had a case to defend. But should you force someone else to pay for something that is against their beliefs? And I think most Americans would agree with that. I think the president took a lot of wind out of the Republican argument when he at least appeared to move to the center. A lot of Republicans think, well, that's really, it's a nice fictional paste over. It doesn't really address the issue. But no, that's going to be an issue for the general election. But Romney doesn't come from the unthinking part of the Republican electorate, from the ideological part. He comes from the establishment part. So in a general election, he is not, I think, as dinged up in this process as it appears right now. His jersey is. The Republican jersey that he wears, I think when it gets to the general election, I think he'll be a little tougher than some folks think at the moment.
I just want to say one thing about Romney is I think he missed a huge opportunity.
He did.
Not to go after Rush Limbaugh. A huge opportunity.
I'll agree with that.
Mitt Romney's biggest weakness is that he doesn't come across as strong in a set of core beliefs and a principled thing. That would have been a layup for him to go after. All Republicans who seem to refuse to say in public what they say in private, which is that Rush Limbaugh is a buffoon, and they don't really listen to him. But to me, it would have been such an easy thing. One, it was the right thing to do, and two, politically, he would have gained from that. And I don't get, and maybe he's so risk averse, or the campaign just is doing this so incrementally. I don't get why he didn't go after Rush Limbaugh.
David.
Well, I agree with that. All of us who've been involved in presidential races know that there are a series of leadership tests that come along, and most of them you can't even anticipate, but you know they're going to come along. I mean, we had ours in our campaign, you know, the Reverend Wright situation, when we had a big debate about whether the gas tax, where we took the kind of counterintuitive position on that because we thought it was kind of a fraudulent gimmick, and we profited from it. I think you do profit when you're running for president if you stand up and take the more difficult position, but the right position, and he had the opportunity and he didn't do it. But Alex, on this point, there has been a significant swing against Governor Romney in the national polls among women since November, like a 14% or so net shift, and in his ratings even more so. And it's part of it. I agree that he came from that wing of the party, but he's worked so hard over the last 6 years to gain admission to the other wing. And so you say, well, it's his jersey, the jersey got dinged up. But, you know, when you switch positions on a kind of serial basis, it's kind of an empty jersey. And I think that concerns people. When Lois said he did well in Massachusetts with women, but he also ran as a kind of moderate, pro-choice governor. He took, you know, on issues of contraception, he did not try and enforce the kind of views that he discusses now. So, I mean, I think that really what's happened is you got a group that's dominating the Republican primaries, and you've got candidates who are trying very hard to win those votes, and they are moving farther and farther away from the mainstream thinking. And he's done that. Well, I think you look at what's happened to Bill McInturff, who's a pollster we all know, does the Wall Street Journal poll, and he said that the Republican race has been corrosive on the Republican Party. And it has for two reasons. One is because it's been almost entirely negative on each other, negative on the president, and sort of negative on the country in some ways. We get good news, and you know, Clint Eastwood does an ad about the auto industry, and the Republican Party goes negative on Clint Eastwood. I mean, so
we made
you know,
his day.
It made his day.
you know, so I think that, and I think it was all in certain ways it culminated in this point that Matthew was making last week, because it would have been the right thing to do to stand up and say,
look, I agree he left the bat on his shoulder, and the last election was about hope and change. This election, the world seems to be coming apart at the seams, so I think Matthew's dead right. This election is about strength and certainty. But to that end, I would point out, though, to my good friend, that
that's
Mitt
never
Romney
a good
is
thing
not,
when a guy starts
you know
off
what
that
comes
way.
after that.
Just, I've been around politics.
be
I know
prepared
that's
for
not
the
a good
knife.
thing.
That whether by choice or by necessity, the president has also had to reverse course on a bunch of issues. You know, he did run as the candidate who was for pay-as-you-go budgeting. Hasn't exactly been that kind of president.
Alex, that's not
he
true.
He has, well, and I can
That's
continue.
not true.
And I can
I was
continue.
with him.
My
I was with
point
him
is,
every day for 2 years.
my point is that I think whether you go to taking no money from lobbyists, no lobbyist in the White House, going, you know, into Libya while you're coming out, there are all kinds of things there that are a test of leadership. And I think both candidates this year are going to be grilled pretty acutely on changing positions on some of these things.
Well,
If I could jump in here, Lois and I were talking last night. I want to ask her to talk about something, our dinner conversation. When you were in Ohio, you were struck by the conversations you had with voters and sort of Romney's struggles to connect with those voters in Ohio, which is the ultimate swing state. I mean, Romney, I think you would all agree on the stage. If Romney can't win Ohio, he can't be president. I think the president could lose Ohio and still be reelected. But I don't see you can't really see it.
No Republican has ever become president
Yeah.
without winning Ohio.
Yeah, so tell us about what you saw in Ohio that
You
maybe
know,
could give some insights to this
what
conversation.
people say, and I did this in Florida as well, I went into the crowds and I just spoke to voters and after voter after voter. And basically what you hear is two things. You hear that people don't know what he believes, and they don't think he's passionate, and they don't think he's going to stand up to President Obama. And you hear that repeatedly, which is why some of the Republican base, they're not necessarily going for Santorum or for Gingrich because, you know, they're more to the right. It's because they think they're fighters and that they're going to stand up. They do not think Mitt is a fighter. They think he's kind of wishy-washy, and they're not sure where he's coming down. The other thing is that he doesn't reveal anything about himself personally. And you can run a campaign on issues, you can run a campaign on math, but people have to like you. Even when President Obama's job approval ratings were very low, his likability was at 70%. People look at the president and they think he's a decent human being. They know his family. They like him. And that, I think, in the end has been dragging up his numbers back into the favorability column. People have no idea who Mitt Romney is. And in fact, a supporter at a recent event said to him, you know, how are you going to show us your heart? And he spoke a little bit about his kids. But it's really hard for him. I mean, when he gets on the stump and he makes a speech, he speaks for about 22 minutes. And he spends 12 of it on America the Beautiful. And, you know, I like the song too. But I think it's because he doesn't know what else to say. I mean, I think that it doesn't come naturally to him. And then on the last campaign stop in Florida, he actually sang it.
But in Ohio, to be fair, he doesn't sing anymore, right?
No, he didn't sing.
And I don't think he even does he even go into the riff?
He's actually pulled back on it a little bit. He told reporters on his plane the other day that it was his idea, not the staff's idea.
I bet the staff appreciated him saying that.
Right, and they did. And the reporters also asked him what was with the trees, and why is it that Michigan has, you know, just the perfect sized trees, and why does he continue to tell everyone that? And he just said, you know, I just think they have a good sized tree, but I'm not going to be saying it anymore.
Because my advisors told me not to
My
say that.
advisors told me not to say
So
it.
he got stumped on that, huh?
He got really stumped on that. There you
Don't
go.
tell anybody he said that. He wants to use that again.
So here's, you think I haven't used that before?
Yeah.
Here's the thing about him singing America the Beautiful. He never sings the verse that I think has such meaning. It's a little known verse, but it honestly is in that, which is God shed his grace on thee till selfish gain no longer stains the banner of the free. That song was written in the Gilded Age as a protest. It was based on a poem that was written as a protest against the excesses of the Gilded Age. And it leads me back to the larger point, which is all of these discussions are, to most people in this country, off point. We've got a fundamental challenge in this country, and it's been building not for 3 years, but for decades, and that is changes in our economy that have made the middle class fragile, that has made that sort of fundamental American compact that if you work hard, you can get ahead. If you act responsibly, you'll be rewarded. Those changes in our economy that go to, you know, technology, and changes in our economy that go to excesses in some sectors of our economy. But people feel that fragility, and they have that concern, and they want to know, what are we going to do as a country to rebuild this economy in a way in which our middle class is growing and not shrinking, in which people have a sense of opportunity, feel like their kids may have a better shot than they had, that they get a fair shake and a fair shot, and if they do the right things, that they can get ahead. That is the fundamental challenge of our time, and they want a serious discussion about this so that when we get off on weeks of abstractions, I think it's frustrating to a lot of people.
Matthew, I think I agree with you. I think we need to have the discussion on that. And maybe my hope is, and maybe Matthew can address this a little bit, is when we get out of silly season, i.e. the primary season, when we get to Romney, Obama,
I don't think we're going to get out of.
You don't think we're going to get? You think it's going to say? You think we're going to not be able, not have a very good discussion on the issue that David framed? Because to me, that's what the election should be about.
Well,
is the approach to address the problems he identified.
I'm not a psychic, but here's what I think is going to happen. Mitt Romney is going to emerge from this primary exceedingly damaged. The president is vulnerable. The president is not in an overwhelmingly great position for re-election, so we're going to have a close election regardless of what happens in this, just because of the nature of the polarized state of the country, where Republicans go, where Democrats go, people in the middle still being uneasy, as David says, about the economy. And then each side's going to think that the only way they can win is to make the other guy the worse alternative. Each side is going to believe that. The president, I think, doesn't want to make it a referendum on Barack Obama, so he wants to make it a choice and said, you might not think everything went well, this is what I think is going to happen. Mitt Romney is going to want to make it all about Barack Obama, nothing about Mitt Romney. They're going to throw, tons of negative at each other in the course of this. We're going to have a debate about this. The Congress, when this emerges, I'm not painting a very happy scenario come November the 7th. The Congress.
Thanks for the subtext.
The Congress is going to be completely polarized and divided again. There's not going to be overwhelming majorities. The American public's going to wake up on November 7th. This is, which is something they've been faced with now. They're going to wake up on November 7th. They don't believe in any trust in any. It's a broader problem, I think, David, than just like the issues you identified. There is no trust in any of the major institutions in the country. Any of them. They don't trust the media. They don't trust the political institutions. They don't trust the government. They don't trust corporate institutions. All major institutions are no longer trusted in the state of this. And each political party, unfortunately, is trying to band-aid all of the institutions back together, or to keep it in, the scaffolding in place, even though it's fallen apart. And the country is saying, who's going to fix this process? The process is broken in Washington. We've had two presidents, one I worked for, one David works for, that basically had huge windows of opportunity, in my view, to try to fix the problem in Washington. For whatever number of reasons, it didn't happen. President Bush had these huge approval ratings coming out of 9/11. He could have done so much. He could have accomplished a lot. The country was ready for it. President Obama had a fairly healthy margin come after the inauguration that it's time to fix the country. It's time to get past this polarization. And what's going to happen, I believe, on November the 7th, is the country's going to sit there and say, okay, I'll vote for Barack Obama, okay, I'll vote for Mitt Romney, and I'm going to vote for this Democrat here and this Republican here, and then they're going to be faced with a complete dysfunctional Washington, D.C. again, and then everybody's going to say, well, what's going to happen in 2016? Who are we going to start campaigning for? And the system is, until somebody actually stands up to the system and says, I no longer care about being head of the party, I'm head of the country, and I don't care if a Democratic congressman gets elected in X, Y, and Z, or a Democratic governor, or a Democratic senator. I'm here to lead the country and change this bitterness and change this divide. We're going to be sitting in this election after election until somebody stands up and says it doesn't matter about the parties anymore, the country and the institutions are failing, and we got to fix it. That's what I think.
Alex.
Well, I share Matthew's dark assessment, but with one little ray of light, and that is...
Thank you.
Last time around, Barack Obama didn't beat John McCain. He beat George Bush. That's who he ran against, and it was a fairly negative campaign. Anywhere Bush had a 35 favorable or over, Barack Obama won. 35 and under, we lost. We had engineered that, so that was most of America, cleverly. But this time, Barack Obama can't afford it to be what re-elects usually are, which is a referendum on the incumbent. He's got to make it, I think, and you've said and others have said, a choice. You've got to run. You've got to create what you were given last time, which is an unacceptable opponent. So I expect that same negative campaigns. The Republicans need to do the same to Obama, focus it on the economy and run that kind of negative campaign too. But that won't be enough. If it's one negative campaign against another, Republicans have no shot. Republicans, Barack Obama is in office. He is president. We have to take it away from him if Republicans are going to win. Right now, we're just trusted to be the brake pedal. The challenge for Republicans is we will be required to have a vision for the country and where to go. And that is, I think, the big challenge. So that's why nothing is catching on our side, why there's no spark, no fire. David, I think you're right. What is this about? How are we going to give our children a better shot? But I think the fall, it's going to be a referendum on that choice. How do we create growth and prosperity in this country? The old way, the way your guy wants to do it, top down, politically and artificially from Washington? Bottom up. Bottom up, organically, naturally. You know, 3 smart guys in Washington in a room, or getting money back in the hands of the American people. That's a fair, legitimate debate to have about how to grow the economy.
Yeah. I don't want to, we could turn this into cable TV. I don't want to do that.
I know you don't.
I mean, I do, but I feel, because I'm not emeritus, I'm actually in the arena here, that I feel honor-bound to just respond, and I'll try and do it in a way that's not contentious. To your point, Matthew, there's no doubt that there's jaundice about institutions. It's one of the reasons why the president got elected. We honestly came to you left one point out of the narrative, which is, yes, we came with high approval ratings and the deepest economic crisis since the Great Depression that required us to do some very difficult things very early. And we would have loved to have had more cooperation to do that. And we didn't have the luxury to work on the institutional problems at the same time that we were trying to save the country from sliding into a depression. And it was problematical, no question about it. But that's a part of the narrative that's important. The journey we've taken together over the last 3 years is part of it. And Alex, on your point, I'm looking forward to the debate. We can have a debate, because my idea of top-down is this notion that if we take care of the folks at the top, if we cut the taxes up there, if we deregulate Wall Street, let them write their own rules again, that somehow everybody will prosper from that. And I think that theory is I think that's the old theory. I think that theory was just tested and it failed. And our notion is that we have to build an economy in which prosperity is more broadly shared, and you do that by having the best educated workforce. You do that by being on the cutting edge of research and development, where you grab control of your energy future with a clean energy future. So, I mean, I think there is a healthy debate to be had, and I look forward to having that debate. And yes, it will be a choice, but that's an honest choice to have. I'm not looking to. You guys said, I'm looking to destroy the Republican candidate. I'm not looking to do that. And anyway, they seem to be doing a pretty good job of that themselves.
All right, let's move on to a little bit different topic. Healthcare. Healthcare. One of the passage of
a less divisive topic. Healthcare.
A different topic. But here's what I'd be interested to get the panel's opinion on. Is we know the Supreme Court's going to rule on the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act this summer. Obviously, that's going to have some level of impact on the race. Based upon Rick Santorum's speech on election night, it looks like he's finally going to put more of an emphasis over the next few weeks on Romney's position on health care, the Massachusetts plan. As we said, probably not enough to win the nomination, but one of the striking things to me as an observer is that the candidates didn't attack Romney on this issue, which I think he could be vulnerable in the primary. I want to know, how do you think that's going to play out in the fall? Does it go away because Romney was for a mandate? Or
here's the God's honest truth.
Yeah.
Mitt Romney passed a plan that's very much like the plan that we passed, and we did predicate our plan very much on what he did, because what he did in many ways was a very good plan. He doesn't embrace it. It's not the child he loves anymore. But he did father it.
Back to Republicans needing contraception.
There's now all this tape that's surfaced over the last few years before 2009 with him saying this is a model for the nation. The mandate remember, the mandate started as a Republican concept, which is there shouldn't be free riders, that if you're going to avail yourself of health care that you ought to pay for it, and everybody ought to have responsibility. And Mitt Romney believed that, thought it was a model for the nation. I think it's very tough for him then to go and campaign against the president on this very slim kind of argument that after years of trying to answer the question, he finally evolved to, which is, well, that was good for Massachusetts, but I don't think it's necessarily good for the country. I think that's a tough thing for him to do.
Did his folks help you guys at all in the development?
Oh,
of the plan?
absolutely. Some of the people who advised him on his plan were central to advising us on our plan because we felt that it was a good concept that he had.
Can I ask
Yeah.
David a question?
Yes.
Do you think that the White House dropped the ball on selling health care and promoting it in a way that the American people understand? Because when I'm out there with the Republicans now, without fail, they always, each candidate, Romney included, saying, I give you my vow, I'm going to repeal Obamacare. And when you go out into the audience and you talk to them, people are so ignorant about what Obamacare is.
Yes.
And you say, you know, this guy said he's going to repeal it and I'm for him. And then you say, well, is it impacting you? No, I have my own health care. Well, what is it about it you don't like? I just don't like it. Well, what? I mean, are you going to ever have to use it? Well, I don't know. They might take my health care away. And then finally, it devolves down to, well, why do I have to pay for somebody else who doesn't have health care?
No, I think that is a, you know, we always knew from the beginning that that this is a very difficult issue because it is easily misunderstood. And I think that that is a feeling out there among many people. If you're asking me, I was there for 2 years in the White House at that time, and probably this fell under my bailiwick. So if there was a failure, it was my failure. And I spent an awful lot of time thinking about it. And it was very, very difficult to unwind that puzzle.
Can it be corrected now?
Oh, I think so.
Because
And
this
look, I mean,
argument,
understand
this
that now
is gonna go
the
on.
health care law is in place, okay? There are 2.5 million young people ages 21 to 26 who have health care today because of that law.
But that's
You know,
one of the-
you know, women have a whole
things
new
people
set
know about it.
of rights. You can't discriminate against women in pricing anymore. The caps, lifetime caps have been removed, so if you get sick now, you can't summarily lose your, you know, seriously ill, you can't summarily lose your health care. Kids with pre-existing conditions now can't be excluded, and in 2014 that'll be for adults as well. There are so many things that, and I think if the Republican Party honestly campaigns, I think Mitt Romney can't do it if for some reason he's not the candidate. I think it's very hard to campaign on, you know what, I'm going to take those things away. That's what I'm going to do.
Alex is dying to jump in on this.
I can see that. That's why I kept on talking.
I'm so lonely here on the right. Couple of things on Romney and health care, but first, I would like to point out that spent the first year of the administration on a fairly divisive issue, which was health care, not dealing with so much with the crisis, many people would say, and that began some of the partisan, let's say, bickering that we have in this administration. But on health care thing, people don't fight over things that they kind of agree on. And frankly, on health care, Mitt Romney doesn't want it to be an issue in a general election. It's going to eat away at his base. The health care mandate is not popular with swing voters. Mitt Romney's not going to advance that. And frankly, President Obama's not going to campaign on it either. He spent the first anniversary of Obamacare, where was it? In Peru, somewhere in South America, somewhere? He doesn't talk about it, and there's good reason. It's not a very popular thing. I think you did a great job communicating. I don't think you should fault yourself at all, David, for explaining what was in the health care plan. I think Americans have come to know it. And, you know, these little things on insurance and keeping your kids until they're 26, those are all the little Band-Aids that were glued on a new approach to health care to make it popular. But the thing itself is still, you know, the shorthand for it is $1 trillion plan that's going to save us money, that's going to cut, you know, $500 billion from Medicare and raise taxes $500 billion. President Obama's not going to want to talk about it. Neither is Mitt Romney. The election is going to want to be about other things like the economy.
Let me just say one thing about this. First of all, I think you're going to find you're wrong about this, about whether we talk about it or not, and whether we do things with it or not, because and I wouldn't be that casual about the little Band-Aids like
Mitt
people
Romney's
having
going to
health
agree
care.
with you. Mitt Romney's going to agree with you on all the
But I will
Band-Aids.
tell you, let me just say this about this, and this is a kind of a personal note on this. I think, you know, you guys know, because you're friends of mine, I have a child with a chronic illness. When she was 7 months old, she's developed epilepsy, and it became a lifelong problem for her. And at the time, we had health care through, I was a newspaper reporter. It was an HMO. Turned out it was good if you're healthy, not so good if you get sick. And so it didn't cover medication, and we needed medication to keep her from having seizures and to keep her alive. $8,000 to $10,000 a month out of pocket on a young reporter's salary, and we almost went bankrupt. The idea that families in the future won't have to go through that is meaningful to me. I don't consider that a Band-Aid. And I think that's why you're in public life, to try and deal with these kinds of burdens, because no family should fear going bankrupt because their child has a chronic illness. So.
One of the, we've talked about the economy, we've talked about healthcare, which leads me to something I hinted at in the beginning is, we're talking a little bit about the president has a record, and you obviously think it's a good record and it's worthy of a second term, and Mitt Romney or whomever thinks it's not worthy of a second term. Let's start with Matthew. You worked with President Bush on that re-election campaign, and what are the challenges as well as the opportunities that a re-elect campaign and the candidate and the folks working on the campaign face that's different? What are the opportunities? What are the challenges?
Well, there's one huge difference. The first one is fun, and the second one is work. I mean,
would you agree with that?
David's probably.
He told me that at the beginning of this, and it's one more thing that I have to say speaks to your insight. Well, look, the first one. I mean, there's no experience like that. There's no experience like that, and I knew when I was going through the campaign in 2008, and I said to all the young kids who worked in the campaign, because I was sadly a lot older than them and had been through a lot of these, that you should really enjoy this because this is the experience of a lifetime. I knew that it would, and we, increasingly knew we were going to be getting into something that was so challenging that by definition the next campaign was going to be
governing's hard.
So, well, governing is hard even in the best of times,
right.
Right. But these weren't the best of times.
Right.
And so, yes, you're absolutely right.
And it's a lot more fun to take the hill than it is to hold the hill. I mean, it's much more fun. And we both ran campaigns and open races, and then you're faced with a re-elect in a very bitter environment with neither President Obama or President Bush was in any kind of great standing to run it. So it wasn't just like we could just sit there and look out the window and say we got this thing in the bank. But some practical things that are much different that make it harder or more complicated is the centers of power or the centers of communication in the first campaign is very unified. Mm-hmm. And it's much more controlled and much easier, and actually the access to the candidate and the ability to sort of interact, ability to call audibles, all of that thing is much easier in the first round before somebody's president of the United States.
Did you all split? Were you in Austin for the re-election?
I was in Austin for the first one where he ran from it, and I moved to Washington for the re-elect.
Okay. And you're back in Chicago now, right?
And that's where the
re-elect is.
Yeah.
So you have the White House operation, which even where people are getting along and out friends and all that, you still have decisions getting made in the communication process, and you have the campaign, then you have the national committee, then you have all these people that have some sway into government. You know that every month, as David is now facing, some jobs report comes out, and you're like Thursday before, it's like, I wonder what I have to deal with tomorrow.
Which reminds me, tomorrow's the day.
Yeah. And it's like, is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? And even we watching John Kerry emerge in the campaign, he was I wanted him. I was like, I want John Kerry for the exact same reason why if I were Barack Obama, I'd want Mitt Romney. Because in an environment where people want authenticity and somebody to be genuine and somebody to be a principled leader, if you want a comparison, the comparison between, regardless of your debate on issues, the comparison between, in my view, between Barack Obama on that value and Mitt Romney doesn't go to Mitt Romney's benefit on that comparison, on that issue. And so all of those complicated natures, and then you sit there and the work of it is day in and day out, and then all of a sudden, things like Abu Ghraib happen. The campaign has a lot of control over that, and what happened over there, then, and that unfolds, and you have to deal with it as a re-election campaign and all the aftermath of it, and you have no say-so. I mean, I called up the White House and said, we need to fire Rumsfeld. Like, what's going on? We're supposed to be the accountability president? And they're like, aren't you supposed to go back to the campaign? And
this has ceased to become a panel and has turned into therapy.
And so it is harder. Yeah, very true, very true. Very, very true. I'm still going through it, actually.
It's a bad sign for you if he's still going.
I thought
I'll be sitting here 4 years from now.
I was going to say, I want to have a panel after 2013. So it is. It's harder. They're still fun. You're blessed, no matter how, to be work on a presidential campaign. There's 250 or 300 people that can work on a winning presidential campaign, really. And to be in that, it's lucky. I mean, we worked hard. All of us have worked hard our entire life. So have thousands of other people on campaigns. To be able to get involved in that campaign, you have to feel blessed in it at that level, and to do that, especially for people at some point in time I very much believed in, but then things developed in a different way along the way. But it's great, but in the second campaign, as I said, it's unbelievable, enduring work. It's not very fun in the re-election campaign like it is in the first campaign.
I guess the flip side of that, though, is that the president gets to fly around in Air Force One, be the president, make important decisions when things happen. That sometimes the country rallies behind the president. So oftentimes you're making these tough decisions. Governing is hard, but there haven't been too many presidents who've lost re-election in modern American history. I mean, I was looking back the other day, and in the 1900s, basically, you had 4. And the ones who won those races, beat those presidents, were giants. Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and even Woodrow Wilson. So it's difficult to beat an incumbent president. Not impossible, but it's difficult.
Yeah, I will say this about the presidency, though, and I think it's more true increasingly over time. Everything Matthew said is right. One of the other differences is that it's very hard to have sustained, genuine interaction between the president and people the way, when we were running 4 years ago, we were traveling all over the country. We were in buses, and we'd jump out into town squares and go into diners, and every single day he was interacting with people, and there's, because of security considerations and the time, he's got a full-time job that requires him to be in the White House. There are all these invisible barriers that you have to deal with, and that's something else that changes this, in addition to everything else.
Let me ask, Alex, you wanted to?
I was just going to say that one of the things, if you do presidential races for a while, you occasionally stop to think, what is the job of the president? What is it that you actually elect this fellow to do, or this woman? And you think about the great modern presidents, and who are they? Who comes to mind? D and R. Well, you think of Roosevelt. Here's a time when the country was kind of coming apart at the seams, 20% unemployment, 900 banks failing. The New Deal. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. We have John F. Kennedy. At a time when Sputnik and everything went over, oh my God, are we losing our place in the world? And John F. Kennedy says, no, new frontier. We're going to go to the moon in 10 years. They're the same guy. 2 transformational figures. Ronald Reagan, again at a time when the country was lost, and is it going to end with a bang or a whimper? Reagan says, no, we have a rendezvous with destiny. They're going to end up on the ash heap of history. The same president. The job of a president is to be this transformational leader. Moses, he's going to take the country to a better place. Last election, we had a guy running on hope and change, saying, yes, we can. This young, energetic leader, and I guess a 70-year-old fighter pilot who'd crashed 5 planes. And at a time when the country was kind of coming apart at the seams, when it's, reminiscent of the 20s again. We're still looking for that. That is what a president is supposed to do. And I think, one of the things I'd love to see, I hope does not happen this election, is that Barack Obama gives up, I think, his great strength, which is, the Secretariat of Hope and Vision, as opposed to...
yeah, well, don't worry about that. That's not going to happen. Don't worry about that, because he has a hopeful vision about where we can go as a country. He just believes we have to do some things to get there, and he's going to make that case. His campaign, it's what he's been doing. But I'll point out to you that we remember Moses fondly, but probably on day 28 of year 28 of the 40 years in the desert, there were probably a lot of doubters. You know, Franklin Roosevelt had his hard times as a president politically. He almost lost, you know, seemed to be in jeopardy at times of losing re-election. Reagan himself, till the economy took off, looked like he was in jeopardy. So, you know, I'm satisfied to play this thing out, and I'm looking forward, because we're good friends and we're going to sit on many panels in the future, that to look back at these 8 years of Obama, and
I'm looking forward to
then we can make a judgment.
I'm looking forward to your positive leadership, Moses.
We're about to the point where we need to invite the audience to come in and participate, but I want to end with this question. Right now, one of the big stories in politics is a movie that's going to premiere on the 10th on HBO called Game Change. We had a premiere at the IOP at the Kennedy School last week, and the movie's great. I'm a Republican. It's fair and balanced. You know, it's a very entertaining movie, and I think it's a fair portrayal. But one of the most important.
I don't think Sarah Palin would call it fair and balanced.
I would disagree with Sarah Palin on that. But it brings up the fact that Mitt Romney, assuming he's the nominee, has got a very important decision to make. John McCain had a very important decision to make in 2008. Barack Obama had one 4 years ago. Let's talk a little bit about, and I'm actually going to ask you to weigh in if you can. But let's start with Lois. If you're advising Mitt Romney, either what type of person, or let's put a name on actual individuals that you think he ought to consider that would help him, that he ought to consider to be his running mate.
Well, he has to pick someone that's more likable, that has a personality. He has to pick someone to his right. He has to pick someone to his right. He's going to go into a convention where people are going to be blah. I mean, you know, it's the same. He's actually facing a lot of what John McCain faced. He's not going to be going into an enthusiastic convention. So he has to decide how much he wants to shake it up.
So you're describing a Sarah Palin type candidate, a game change type candidate.
Well, he's not going to go with a Sarah Palin type candidate.
No, he's not going to go. But I mean, you're describing that same situation, a game change.
Yeah, he's got to have a game changer. He's got to just, I mean, it's got to be somebody conservative. If I were just going to like throw out a name right now today, I would throw out Mike Huckabee.
Okay.
I mean, he's likable. The right likes him. He's not offensive to the middle. You know, he's conservative, but he seems to be reasonable. I mean, just a thought. And he kind of covers the South.
Yeah.
So somebody like that.
Matthew, what's your take on this?
I'll give you. I haven't seen Game Change, but it was just a funny story actually. So right after Sarah Palin got picked, I was at something with CNN, and I got asked about it, and I said that Sarah Palin is completely unqualified to be president of the United States, and that John McCain will regret the day that he did this because he put the country at risk if he had gotten elected by putting her on the ballot. And within an hour, one of the stars of the movie, Steve Schmidt, called me, who's a friend of mine, and said, you just don't understand what's going on. She's totally qualified. She's the best possible candidate we can possibly have. I can't believe you said that. And I said, okay, let's have this conversation after the election or whatever, when you've like got off the Kool-Aid. So I guess in the course of the movie, he got off the Kool-Aid or something in the course of the movie. I guess.
Well, he's actually in the beginning and ending scene.
Yeah, there's a transformation.
It begins with the Anderson Cooper interview. It's the beginning and the ending scene.
I think, first of all, one thing we don't know yet is if this process continues to go and Mitt Romney by the end of June doesn't have 1,145 delegates, and that he then has to reside in some, like the super delegates or the uncommitted delegates that he has, and if Rick Santorum, or Newt Gingrich, but probably Rick Santorum, doesn't have close to that, but he has a number of delegates, he goes into convention, you have all these people at a convention that are going to have to buy into whatever this possible. That's going to complicate his decision on who he's going to pick for vice president. I don't think there's any way he wants to pick Rick Santorum and put him on the ballot, but that is going to be part of a conversation that they're going to have at a convention where there's going to be a majority of delegates that aren't really happy with Mitt Romney as the presidential nominee. So I think that is going to complicate what otherwise might be a decision he would want to make. I don't think Mitt Romney. I think Mitt Romney is enough, and I've had a few conversations with him. He's not enough of a CEO business type leader that he is going to want to pick somebody that he believes, like a CEO would be, that could take over for him. I think he believes in that. I actually believe Mitt Romney, loves the country, and he wouldn't make a decision, I think, like the Sarah Palin decision. I believe. I think he, like a business guy, said, I can't put somebody the second in command who could take over and run the country. I believe that. I think that he has to do both that decision and some, maybe not a game change decision, but something that's going to adjust the conversation. For me, I would have Marco Rubio on speed dial, is who I would have on speed dial. He's got a huge Latino-Hispanic problem. The Republicans do generally, but Mitt Romney does specifically, that he's got to fix. He could probably put away Florida in that instance immediately with Marco Rubio on the ticket. Marco Rubio is young, attractive, very well-spoken, very attractive family, loved by the conservatives and Tea Parties, but he's not viewed as sort of a crazy social conservative and all of that, and he could speak to sort of a generational change. And so I don't know who else. The convention will complicate this, but if I were him, I would actually be talking to Marco Rubio right now to try to warm him up to the idea. I don't know if he's interested or not, but that's the guy I would go to at this point in time. I would say pick a woman, which is, I think, somebody has, I think that would be, but when you go through the list of potential candidates on that who could help them politically and all that, there's not a big list in the Republican Party on that list.
You have a bunch of women governors who are in their second year.
Yeah, but even Marco Rubio is in there, but they're just not, this person needs to have some charisma. Marco Rubio has charisma, so it'll complicate, Santorum is going to complicate that decision big time, but Marco Rubio would be, if I were advising him, first on my list.
Alex?
This campaign's been all over the map so far. It's going to change again. We're one banana peel away from a foreign policy crisis. Anybody who's picked up a newspaper recently, Mitt Romney does not have great foreign policy credentials. And Matthew's right, it'd be great to have a woman. I'd recommend Hillary Clinton. But barring that, I think Marco Rubio, the all-Mormon ticket is, he was Mormon till he was 10, it turns out, is probably the strongest hand. I'd keep an eye on Bob McDonnell out of Virginia, a governor who helps bring the conservative base to the ticket, but has governing experience and is seen as a reasonable Republican as well. You do have the Susana Martinez's, young Republican governors out there. But nothing new grew under the shade of the big Bush tree. We had we're waiting for that next generation of Republicans to mature. And that will happen, but it's not going to happen in time for this election.
Would you like to weigh in on this?
I don't think they need my advice on this. I'm taking copious notes on all of these observations. I will say this. I think that, there was a Fox Latino poll that came out the other day that showed Obama beating Romney 70 to 14 among Latinos. And there's a reason for that. And I think one of the things that Romney will have to deal with when he gets the general election, if he gets the general election, is he's mortgaged a lot for this nomination in order to try and knock Rick Perry out of the race. He ran way to the right on immigration. He's run way to the right on some of these women's issues to try and get to the right of Rick Santorum. I don't think you can fix that with a vice presidential pick. Whoever you pick for vice president isn't the candidate. You're the candidate. And so I think his problems are going to be harder to solve than simply putting a Hispanic or a woman on the ticket.
Let me ask you just a quick follow-up. When you were talking about that 70-14 number, does that put more states into play than the usual suspects?
Well, I think
the 10 to 12 that we always, the last 3 or 4 cycles have essentially been the same.
Well,
states.
I think it makes it certainly changes the dynamic in some of those very important states like Nevada and Colorado and so on. The one state that I think we've said is a state that we're keeping a close eye on is Arizona.
Yeah.
So, hey, can I take a point of personal privilege though
Yes.
before, because I know we're running out of time, and I just wanted to explain why I'm here, which people may be asking. But you didn't mention, but I'm on the board of the IOP. And I've been inspired by the IOP. And I've been inspired in part because I think it's so important to create good role models for young people to understand that you can have disagreements over issues and still appreciate each other as folks who care about the country, who are committed to public service, who believe that it's a noble pursuit. It's what Matthew said is absolutely right. There's tremendous cynicism about politics and public service right now, and it's well-earned cynicism. And yet, if we don't have that, then what do we have? We can't surrender the process to the cynics. So, all of you who are here in support of a program that will produce great young leaders both on the Republican side and the Democratic side, and perhaps in Matthew's independent party. And the country will profit from it. So, and this fellow sitting here is a great model for that, because he and I probably don't agree on a lot of stuff. He's on the Republican side, but in a sense, he was a casualty of this the kind of politics, that sort of scorched earth politics that really holds us back. So I just wanted to, somebody needed to say that, and so I thought.
Good. Thank you. Thanks, David. Thank you. I'm glad I let you take that point of personal privilege. It looks like we've got two microphones, one here and one here. Since this is a forum on the road, we're going to operate with forum rules, which are, we want to ask all of you who ask questions to identify yourselves, what affiliation you've got to the university, if any, and make sure your question is brief and actually is a question. And questions do not contain a speech followed by "Do you agree?" They are short, brief, concise, witty, and then in the question mark. And also, I want to thank tonight's forum on the road, and a few more that we hope to be doing over the next couple of years wouldn't be possible without the generous support of David Rubenstein. And so if you could all join me in thanking him for his support. And, okay. Why don't we start over here? And we've got a lot of people. Some of you over there, you might want to come over here. Yes.
Stephen Gutwillig, College 86. What do you anticipate the impact of hundreds of millions of dollars of super PAC money is going to be on this cycle, given that we have not seen this particular version of money in politics before? And isn't it likely that, given how overwhelmingly negatively that money is going to be used, that the impact will be to depress turnout?
Alex?
Well, my experience doing quite a few negative ads over the years. Father of the attack ad, I think, somewhere.
And effective one.
Yeah. Well, is that they don't necessarily depress turnout. It's like watching good, hard-hitting football. It depends if it's something worth fighting for. Americans have fought for lots of things and have shed blood in foreign places. We've done a lot of violent things for some very important things. And so I don't think necessarily that just negative. You know, there's a difference between a cop and a killer. Somebody that kills purposely for their own gain, society sanctions. But somebody that goes, risk their own life to put themselves out there in the public arena to protect society, to do something important, we want them to fight hard. So it depends how selfless the cause is, I think. And yes, our politics has gotten small in a lot of ways, and I think we're seeing that this campaign. When your campaign is not about big things, the small things become the big things. And I think at this point, I'd say that that's fairly true on both sides. Super PACs, the one way to look at it is that you now have politics becoming a lot more like football, where the campaign, football is offense and defense, two different teams, two different sets of players, two coaches, the same purpose. And that's what's happening out there now. The campaigns are fragmenting. I don't know that it's any more or less money at the end of the day. It's certainly more free form than it's ever been. But last time around, I think President Obama raised in his affiliated groups, what, about 900?
No, less than
million?
750 or something.
Okay. He may do something along those lines this time. I think you'll see Republicans fall short of that overall this time. But it's, you know, $1 billion is not that much. I still think it's cheaper than having President Obama as president. That costs trillions.
You might want to respond to that. No.
I can't.
It's a joke, David. It's a joke.
I thought that I made such a nice speech there, and this is the thanks I get.
Yeah.
We're trying to be good role models.
Okay.
Let me ask you
But let me just respond to this, because I honestly, I don't think we should pretend that there's not. You know, it's not, these super PACs aren't riding to the ramparts to protect the country and everything else. They're largely funded by interest groups, and their spending is almost entirely negative. And we've seen the impact in the Republican primaries. The super PACs have spent tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars. 99% of the ads they've run have been negative. The Republican primary turnouts have been depressed over the course of this campaign. And if you looked at the Wall Street Journal NBC poll, Republican enthusiasm has crashed as a result of it. I don't think this kind of steady stream of negativism is healthy or good. And I don't think, and you know, yes, we spent $750 million last time over the course of a primary and a general. But what we're looking at now is a Republican campaign, and then an additional, you know, $700 million or $1 billion of super PAC spending, almost entirely in negative ads. I mean, I think that it's I'm not as cheerful about it as Alex. I don't think it's good for democracy. I don't think it's good for the debate. I don't think it's likely to be very uplifting, and I don't think it's likely to be very enlightening.
I'm not here to defend negativism in politics that much. I think the hardest thing to do in politics is lead, is to lift people's eyes over the horizon and take them to a better place. That's what the reason there's a lack of enthusiasm on the Republican side. It's not because we have negative ads, it's because we're not taking people anywhere. That being said, let's remember that the most negative campaign for president ever run was yours. It's spending a ton of money, negative, and it actually, the country felt great about it because it felt it had a purpose. So I don't think there's anything wrong with telling people, don't touch the hot stove, it will burn you. It could be seen as a good civic responsibility.
I'm not going to, obviously I'm not going to accept you kind of slid an assertion in there that I would hotly
You can assert that you
but we
disagree.
could spend
You can assert that you disagree, and then
we could go through a number of...
Let's go to this microphone over here.
Yeah, Stephen Graham, Harvard College and Harvard Law School. Do you think, it looks like Mitt Romney is doing a campaign of numbers this time, where he's not worried about all the talk, he's trying to put together numbers for delegates. Do you think he's going to try to do that same thing in the presidential campaign and use that same strategy?
Well, I mean, he's putting together a numbers strategy because he has no other ability to win the nomination. I mean, to me, I think it's always a mistake. He needs to be aspirational. He's using arithmetic. And that never is, it sets you up well. He's doing it because he thinks their campaign, I'm saying thinks it's his strategy to win victory. I think they're going to arrive at, they know that the presidential contest, even when we talk about electoral colleges and all of us plan these things, it's a national campaign. And there's little ability anymore to sort of say, I'm going to isolate the campaign in Iowa, and I'm going to isolate the campaign in Michigan and, you know, in California and Texas and all that. These are national conversations. There's no longer really like, I can do this campaign here and I don't have to worry about that there anymore, really. So I think he's going to know it's going to have to be a national conversation in a national effort. They'll do their targeting. They'll do all that kind of effort. But I think it's actually a mistake. I mean, I think he should be spending his time figuring out what's the most inspiring, aspirational thing I can say to Republicans or to the country, which he has not done yet at all. And in any of his language, it's always been, you know, you might not like me, but I'm going to make you like them less. And now, I mean, to me, the total sign of this, like, what kind of campaign are they running? He's likely going to be the nominee. He needs to start unifying the party, and he takes one delegate away from Rick Santorum in Michigan. it made them very bitter, very thick to get one delegate because of some crazy rules change or something like that, which just tells you the level of the campaign they're at. I think they're a mistake. They need to be inspiring and not worried about arithmetic, but that's what they're doing.
Well, it struck me, if I can make compared to 08, when having heard the story of your delegate strategy in 08, where you were very clearly, the campaign was very clearly focused on picking up delegates in some of these caucus states and things like that. I don't think the public knew, because you didn't talk about it that way. The president talked about why he wanted to be president, and you happened to focus on it that way, whereas Romney talks very specifically, I'm going to go get this delegate in this spot, rather than sort of hiding it under the table. And I think it's something.
Well, these guys have identified this. I mean, he's run a thoroughly tactical campaign. And, Alex worked with him 4 years ago. I think the absence of someone like Alex is being felt because there's no, the process has become the message. And every week, whatever tactic is necessary to be employed to get through that particular week is employed, whether it's the positions he takes or the candidate he attacks. He's been like one of these video games. Every time someone moves, he zoop and goes after that guy. And that it's very hard to inspire.
More like whack-a-mole.
But so I mean, I don't know what kind of strategy he's going to run in the general election, but so far he's run a very, very tactical campaign.
Those nice words. This means I have to buy drinks again.
Yes.
Given the importance of Congress, the disappearance of moderates, the more party line votes, and filibustering, in this campaign, will there be more effort to make it Democrats versus Republicans in order, will there be more help from the presidential campaigns for the folks in the legislature to have something effective after the award, or is it just going to be the same as usual?
Well, they've all made clear that they're not going to help. I mean, the DNC is going to spend all its money on the presidential because these two guys need so much money to get elected, and Obama doesn't want to, spend his capital on Congress, which is kind of a mess right now. So I think it's every man for himself.
Well, let me just say that we have, we've supported the party's candidates in the past, but we do have these. I described the situation that we're facing, and I do think that if historically our performance is going to impact on those races. I mean, if we do well, they're going to do better. Let me say beyond that, because I don't want to sort of buy into the logic, and Matthew articulated the logic, that we are locked in this inexorable kind of race to oblivion in terms of our politics. I have a different view. And my view is that we've gone through a period of time where there was a strategy of obstruction. It was articulated. It wasn't hidden. You had leaders of the Congressional Party on the other side saying our primary goal is to defeat the president and so on. And they behaved that way. I think they're getting punished for it right now. And you see it in the low standing of the Congress. And when the president gets reelected, I believe that there are Republican members of Congress, Republican members of the Senate, who really do want to get things done. And they've been sort of subject to this reign of terror. And I think when we win, the day we win, I think the next morning they're going to wake up and they're going to blink into the bright light of a brand new day. And they're going to turn to the Grover Norquists of the world and the others who have held them hostage. They're going to say, we did it your way, it didn't work, and now we're going to work with this president. We may not agree with him on a lot of stuff. They'll do what Trey Grayson would have done if he had been in the Senate. They'll say, where we can work with him, we will. And where we can't, we'll disagree, but we'll try and do it in a constructive way. That is my hope and my expectation.
Yes.
Hi, Karen Skelton, the Kennedy School, 1986, and I also worked in the Clinton White House during his reelection, and I just want to thank you guys for coming out here and having this great conversation. I want to ask a question about the primary calendar. California has 38 million people, most of whom never get a chance to participate in picking the nominee for their party. So I'm wondering if any of you think that the calendar should be shifted away from the couple 100,000 who pick the start the trajectory of the process in Iowa, or if you think it works the way it is.
Well, first of all, you should sit tight because this could be your year.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you were in the other party.
Right.
Yeah, right, exactly, if you were in the other party.
Let me chime in. This is actually something I know a little bit about. When I was a Secretary of State, I chaired the Presidential Primary Reform Committee, and one of the difficulties with changing the primary role of Iowa and New Hampshire from what it is right now is that the folks in Iowa and New Hampshire care a great deal about being first, and the rest of the country doesn't care as much. And if you are, and you can't probably say this, but when you go to Iowa and New Hampshire, you basically have to pledge, I'm going to keep you first, because you want to get their votes because you want to win first. So it creates a bit of a problem. And so my approach to reforming the system, what I always argue was, let's fix what comes after Iowa and New Hampshire, because that's maybe a more realistic approach. And what we all would like to see is that the calendar's pushed back. And I don't think anybody likes primaries in early January. And we'd like to see more people in more states have more of a say. The difficulty is that the parties have had a hard time imposing any kind of discipline on the states. And there's some real constitutional questions about whether Congress could pass a primary system. So I think we may be stuck with where we are. My preference is a rotating regional system where the regions over a 16-year cycle get a chance to go first, second, third, or fourth. And you probably would get through the first 3 regions almost all the time. But that's what the Secretary of State proposal, it's something I've talked a lot about nationally, but it's very hard to implement, and we've seen the penalties not work. Now we've seen this year, this is striking, is states have just said, we don't care about these rules, and we're just gonna have a dog and pony show, a beauty contest. And the candidates have gone, the media has covered it, and they've been rewarded. Alex, I think you wanted to chime in.
I was just going to say, now it's candidate-driven and media-driven, and it is a brutal process, but it is a brilliant process in that these campaigns don't pick candidates, they make candidates. These guys are so much different than when they started. They get better, and they do get to go to every little nook and cranny of the country, and they do get a chance to listen, and they do get a chance to test themselves and grow, and we do stake them out on issues. So whether some process to ensure that everybody gets their turn at the head of the line or near the head of the line would be one thing, but I think the length overall of the process, is training there's no manual for the job ahead. And this is, I think it's a pretty powerful way to do it.
I bet you don't agree.
Well, I have a big, broader, different thing on this, which is there's stuff. There's a reason why we're ending up with the leaders that we are, and it's a problem in the system. I actually think there's hope, but not in the way I think maybe David enunciated, which is I think the institutions that we have to collapse, and completely, I believe. And that because they no longer meet the hopes, dreams, and beliefs and aspirations of people. They've become corrupt at every level. That most Americans out there don't think the federal government's they'd rather get on Craigslist and send a generator than think FEMA can respond in time. They get online and do petitions for horrible dictators in Uganda or the crimes going on in Uganda that people don't seem to focus on. So to me, the calendar is reflective of our politics, but fundamentally I think what's happening out there is people are basically saying, listen, I don't know what's going on in Washington, it all seems messed up, but I can clean up my neighborhood. I can treat somebody well next door to me. I can care for a child that may be not getting health care, but I'm not going to work. It'd be great if he could, but I'm going to try to do what I can in my house, in my neighborhood, in my village, where I work. And I think fundamentally that we're holding on, so many people in this business and this thing are holding on so tight to a system that is no longer meets their people's dreams, that once it let go, the public, leaders never lead. They never lead. Leaders follow. And the leaders are reflective of the country is anxious and they don't know where to turn, but they do know the institutions that much of what we've talked about no longer work. And so what they're going to do, and they're starting to do, and everybody sees it, social entrepreneurs, all these people out there see it, they say, listen, I don't know about that, but I can fix this problem here, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, independents or whatever, and they're turning to that and fixing the problem, treating people well, doing all that. And part of the problem we have is that people that advocate on behalf of tolerance and compassion and kindness, gentleness and love aren't the strong voices. They seem meek. The voices of tolerance and compassion and compromise seem meek. And the voices that seem strong and vibrant are the voices of polarization in the country. And I think until people that believe in kindness, compassion, love, and tolerance are the voices of strength in the country, once that happens, we'll have new leaders. And when that happens...
Yes.
Mal Block, College 52. I think everything the panel's discussed tonight will be moot before the election if the Israelis decide to attack Iran before the election. The price of oil will shoot skyward. The country will rally around the president. I think the Israelis stand a good chance of attacking before the election because I'm not sure they trust Mr. Obama's promise to back them, but I think they will trust it if they do it before the election. So what do you think will be the result? Either higher oil, which may throw our economy into great recession or depression, or rally around the president under wartime conditions? Which do you think will predominate?
Well, I hope that doesn't happen. I mean, I think that that's the scarring of this country through the war of the last 10 years, the wars of the last 10 years is so fundamentally put us at a huge disadvantage globally. The trillions of dollars spent, the women and men that have been lost in life and limb and come back, thousands injured, communities shattered. I pray that that decision is not made and that we're not dragged into it. How it affects politics, I just hope it never. I hope it doesn't happen.
Usually, in stormy seas, people cling to the life raft they're on. If you're president of the United States and the country has to take to arms, then people rally around the president. We've seen that with George Bush. We've seen that and we'd see it again, I think.
I think the president spoke the other day about this, and in the years that I worked for him at the White House, I saw him work through a lot of these national security issues. I saw him work through issues that he knew had life and death consequences. I don't think, I'm not going to engage in political calculations about this. I don't think he's engaging in political calculations about this. This is deadly serious stuff, and we ought to treat it as such for all the reasons that these guys and Matthew talked in some detail about this. No one who's served in that job can do anything but be very sober about these decisions. And I know that he believes that we have time and space here to ratchet up the pressure as we have. I mean, the Iranian economy is in disarray as a result of his painstaking. I was with him in bilats all over the world. There wasn't one time where he was with a foreign leader where he didn't spend significant time talking about the threat of Iran, nuclear weapons, and the need to ratchet up pressure on Iran through sanctions. And that's why we have the toughest global sanctions ever imposed on any nation. So, but I associate myself with what Matthew said. And I think rather than conjecture on the political implications of it and accept the premise of your question, I think I'll pass.
I think if I could say, there are a lot of external factors. I think if we were having this conversation 4 years ago, what happened in the late fall, the financial crisis, some people were predicting things like that. But the reality is it wasn't something that you probably 4 years ago were thinking that we would have been on the brink of an economic collapse like we face. There are a lot of things that can happen in the world.
I will tell you about that, though. Yeah. September 14th, 2008, we were at a meeting, a strategy meeting, and the president said, I talked to Hank Paulson last night, and he told me about something that's going to happen over tonight that I can't share with you, but it's going to be very consequential, and it's going to really devastate the markets, and we're going to be in for a rough ride here. And I told him that I would work with them to try and deal with this crisis, and this is a place where good government is good politics, and and that's the way we're going to do it, and I don't want anybody straying from that. And for the next 10 days, as there was all this tumult in Washington about whether they were going to act or not, president worked closely with them, and Senator McCain was a little bit more uncertain about where he was on this. And I actually believe the election was won in that period of time, those 10 days, because this is what we were talking about before. There are tests. There are tests that come up that you cannot anticipate when you're running for president of the United States or when you are president of the United States, and that's when people get the measure of who you are.
I think that's a fair point about that.
You know, the other thing is that what amazes me about, I'll speak about the Republicans, is that they're ready to declare war on Iran, but they won't stand up to Rush Limbaugh. I mean,
Exactly. Exactly.
Alex and I are not going to defend our party on this point. Yes, next question.
Alan Grass, Law School. I hope the question doesn't sound too off the wall, but I'd like to ask the four of you who are not part of the administration, is there a candidate, a Democrat, who might significantly enhance President's chance of re-election other than Joe Biden on the ticket? And if so, is there any plausible way that that could occur?
There's no plausible way it will occur, because the political ramifications of dumping your vice president just so far outweigh, any liability that it could create. I'm just, this is not something David would address directly, but you just can't look like somebody that would throw somebody over and be disloyal, and so it's almost a moot
Or
point.
worse, even be somebody like that.
Oh, be somebody like that, right? Exactly.
That's even worse than looking like somebody like that.
So the rumor that's going around that he's going to dump Biden for Hillary Clinton, it just ain't going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
As a Republican, I'd be happy to tell you that somehow Joe Biden's a liability to the ticket.
he's not.
But looking at the numbers, he's not. As a matter of fact, I think Biden ought to keep Obama.
Yes, next question.
I'm Chick Nelson, Harvard College, Harvard Law School, and for years with the U.S. Institute of Peace. I wanted to go back for a moment to the question of Iran, which I thought your discussion was very good. But how can we do anything to make the debate during the campaign more intelligent on both sides? I'm a Democrat. I think the Democratic side has been very well handled. I think some of the Republican side is just highly irresponsible. And I would hope that just for the good of the Republic, it becomes more moderated and more focused.
Well, I have a quick solution to how to change it. Make every candidate who runs for president, their children subject to the draft. And I have a whole other theory about how we declare war in this country, which I'm actually with Ron Paul on this, which is that we ought to actually declare war, and I think we ought to have a draft, and I think everybody over 18 ought to be subject to it, because we'd be declaring war a lot less, and we'd be doing a lot less military action if every single person in every single community of this country. It's a free pass for the Republicans, and they're totally being irresponsible about this, completely irresponsible about the enunciation of a policy, not totally fact-based, but it's so easy to make these not pay for it. We didn't pay for these wars. We just wrote, just put it on a credit card. We're not going to pay for the wars. We said it's going to end, the war on terrorism was supposed to be the war to end all wars. But oh, by the way, we're not going to have war bonds. We're not going to bring the country together. We're not going to, do anything. But we're just going to put this on a credit card, and we're going to ask, 2 million volunteers to do deployment after deployment after deployment. I speak from this because I have a son who was deployed to Iraq for 18 months. So I think that it is so easy when you don't have any skin in the game to make these ridiculous, irresponsible pronouncements.
On the other hand, back up a second and look at the way our system works. It is the clash of opposites. It is the thesis and antithesis. Then they come together and clash, and out of it, it's male and female. It is out of that clash something positive comes. There are some folks who would argue with you that the saber rattling on the right, though politically a lot of folks would agree it's irresponsible, is actually providing a great value to the process right now and letting folks abroad know that unless they go to the table and achieve something, there are darker days ahead. So, all the conflict is not always useless.
Well, that's like saying, let's wheel out the crazy aunt at the party and make everybody else look saner.
No. Actually, it's not quite like that at all. Actually, let's talk, let me put it in terms that perhaps some of us was sex.
This is the second or third
second time. I'll bring it up. Why don't we have a single-payer sexual system? Why don't we have just one? And we all agree and sing Kumbaya. Well, we do, but it only leads to the amoeba. It doesn't evolve very far. Turns out through this magical conflict, things clash, and life evolves and moves forward. It's like that in an economy. It's like that in foreign policy. It's like that in life. So actually,
I must be
it's
married
kind of
to
how
this thing is sailing way above my head.
It's the way life moves
We
forward.
gotta get back to the subject matter.
Yeah, let's go to the next
Conflict is
question.
But let me just say, I think at the end of the day that I actually believe in the good sense of the American people, and I think that people recognize pandering and irresponsibility when they see it, and I think those who engage in this kind of stuff for political purposes. I mean, there are people, John McCain is consistent on these issues, and I give him credit. I mean, he's generally for military action in most cases. But, to just throw it out there as a way to get through a particular meeting or a week in a campaign or so on, and talk about issues of war and peace and that. I think people get that. I think people get that.
I think people get that too. But it's hard to also talk about bipartisanship and getting along when somehow Republicans are always stigmatized as folks who would put politics before country. That's not my experience on the right. It's not my experience on the left.
I'm not suggesting, I didn't say that. Someone's a little defensive.
Yeah.
I think we need another question.
Okay.
Yes.
Michael Gardner, PhD philosophy, 1971. Question for David Axelrod about the Healthcare Reform Act. I was wondering whether the administration is happy with the following feature of the act passed by Congress, namely that it leaves in place the system of profit-making private insurance plans, taking maybe 20% of the healthcare dollar. I was wondering why you support that if you do, instead of favoring the system used in other countries, somewhat like ours, where those companies are required to operate on a nonprofit public utility basis.
Because there's a broad consensus in this country that supports the healthcare system, the private healthcare system that we have. And there wasn't a consensus to change it. And the president's view was that what we ought to do is reform the system that we have in such a way that would expand coverage and promote best practices in order to make the system more efficient. I think it's fairly clear that there's not a consensus for that, and we would not have had health reform if we had gone down that road. And I must say, for the reasons that I stated before, I don't think we had the luxury of. Alex said, "Well, why did he get distracted by that?" Well, first of all, at current course and speed, if there hadn't been any changes, the whole system would implode over time when you look at the way costs were rising. And secondly, if we didn't act in the first couple of years of this administration, likely it wouldn't have gotten acted on, and we would have gone another decade or another generation, and more and more people would be disenfranchised. More and more people would find themselves in the situation my family was in or worse. So we didn't have the luxury of making what some may feel was a more perfect system the enemy of a good system, when the consensus of the American people is that they are comfortable with a private insurance system.
We're going to have to make this the last question from the audience. I apologize, but we're close to almost 9 o'clock in Los Angeles. You guys got to drive a long way.
David Kinney, College 79. I want to follow up. You both A couple of people talked about leadership tonight. Matthew just finished talking about the system. Alex was talking about leaders in the 1900s. Two parts to this question. One, with the number of people we have in this country, with the way the system works now, why don't we have anybody, and I mean anybody, I mean running or incumbent, that truly is a leader? And is there any chance that one might emerge between now and November besides the people who are running? Within the way the system works, is it possible for somebody to do that?
Are you talking about on the Republican side? Or?
I think he's.
No, I think this is a broader commentary.
Oh, I see.
Broader,
No, I'm asking whether or not there's, okay, on the Republican side, fine.
Well, there's also, I mean, there is this Americans-elect group that is going to probably have ballot access in all 50 states. They are on the ballot in California, and it's an online convention that anybody can participate in. So in theory, if another leader emerged, somebody that could capture the public's attention, that person could get on the ballot via the Americans-elect ticket, if you will. And you have to pick people who are opposite parties. So if you're a Republican, you have to run with a Democrat. So that there is a technical option. So I think I'll answer that, but maybe I'll kick it to the group and maybe repackage this a little bit. A larger question about leadership, the need for leadership, and maybe some of the struggles we're having identifying the right kind of leadership. And I'll start
Well,
with
obviously, I disagree with the questioner and the premise of the question, because I believe we have a great leader. And I say that, I say that because I had an opportunity to be a witness to me, leadership is doing things when they're hard and not easy, that is in the interest of the long term and not just the short term, the next election, your own politics, and so on. And I sat there and I watched, there was nothing, the first three things that we had to do, shore up the financial system, shore up, rescue the auto industry and pass a Recovery Act. None of those things were popular, and none of them were easy to do. I sat in a room with the president. I told him, even in Michigan, they don't want you to intervene to help the auto industry. And he said, I get that and I understand why. But we're in the midst of the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. And if we let the auto industry collapse, we're talking about another 1 million jobs lost, a great iconic American industry gone. And if we can get them to rationalize themselves and produce cars that people buy in the 21st century, and save those jobs and help them grow, we ought to do it. And he took the shot. It was highly unpopular, and we know what happened. To me, that is leadership. He ran for office saying that he was going to responsibly end the war in Iraq that Matthew referred to. He did that. He said that he was going to end the don't ask, don't tell policy. It took 2 years to get that done. I was in the room when he called Secretary Gates and Admiral Mullinan, and he said, this isn't a conversation about whether we're going to end the policy. It's a conversation about how and when, and I want to work with you on this. And over the next 2 years, painstakingly bringing along all the institutions that needed to be a part of that decision. I think healthcare was a courageous decision because, as was pointed out, it was not, I guess I pointed out, it wasn't a politically easy decision. Nobody told the president this would be a political winner for you. In fact, he was told quite the opposite. And he said, I know that's true. I went into him in the summer of 2009 with polling data when all hell was breaking loose on health care. And I said, Mr. President, I have to report to you on where I think things are at. And he listened very respectfully, and he's a good listener, which is rare in politics. And when I was done, he said, look, I know you're right, but I just got back from Green Bay, Wisconsin. I saw a woman there, 36 years old, married. She has 2 children. Both she and her husband have jobs. They have insurance. But now she has stage 4 breast cancer. And she's hit her caps, and they're not covering her treatment anymore. And she's just devastated, thinking that she's going to die and leave her family bankrupt. And he said, that's not the country that we believe in. That's not the country we want to have. He said, so let's just keep on fighting. So with all due respect, I just don't accept your premise. To me, that is leadership, and I'm proud to be working for this guy.
I think your broader question is hard to answer, and it's very complicated, and people have written books on it for hundreds of years. Leaders, you know, fill vacuums. They're born. I don't think they're made. I think that, you know, they come up through a system, and whether it's in corporate or military or politics, they come up at the right time and they show the public who they are. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So right now, this is who we've got. With regard to the Republicans, no, nobody else is going to come along. I mean, this is the best they produced, and the system is not equipped to handle somebody new. And nobody would want to step into this mess right now, I don't think, because you'd have to be self-financed, and who would want to be the one to, you know, run against an incumbent? I mean, I just don't think it's going to happen. So, Matthew.
I think that, I mean, part of the problem, it's the best. This is the best candidate under the circumstances the Republican Party will produce. It doesn't mean it was the best possible candidate out there that could have run for the Republican Party. And why did that happen is a more fundamental question. Why did that happen? And I think it happened because of there's so many people out there that just like, do I want to put myself through that? Do I want to be asked about, you know, what happened with my wife 6 years ago, and, you know, does it really matter? No, but I'm going to be asked all these questions. Do I want to be asked about, like, something I took a loan out on my kid's car or something, and something went wrong and I missed a payment, and whatever the thing happens, and all of that, there was a number of candidates in this whole system, and Alex is right. The gauntlet is a good thing because it goes through it, but also the gauntlet has gotten, it's much worse now, because so good people, unfortunately, good people are now passing and say, why would I do that? Why would I do it? It's really unfortunate, because I think the only way to fix that problem, that leadership problem, is to be engaged in it. This is my fault with Olympia Snow and what she did. You know, she leaves Congress, and sort of another example, she leaves Congress because she's tired of it and all that, and then, I think her diagnosis of the problem was wrong, but her solution, her diagnosis of the problem was right, but her solution was wrong. Is good people abdicating from the system and not getting involved or not doing it is actually makes it worse. And so the Republican system, part of it is because there's no longer a Republican establishment. I said before we came out here, I mean, if you think in terms of Animal House, the fraternity is now in charge of campus. And they keep running around thinking, well, where's Dean Wormer? And he's got to fix this system. And we are at, you know, it's why Christine O'Donnell got nominated in Delaware. It's why Sharon Engel got nominated for the Senate race in Nevada. And that has to sort of work its way through. But the good candidate, most of the good candidates, in my view, passed because they didn't want to go put themselves through that. Mitch Daniels passed because he didn't want to put himself through that. Jeb Bush passed because he didn't want to put himself. A number of candidates that people thought would have been great passed on it, unfortunately.
Thank you, because that's what I was looking for.
Okay. Well, so now that you've heard what you're looking for, Alex, you get the last word.
I think a lot of that is dead on the money. That you know, it seems now, as vicious as the process is, that if you to run for office, you either have to come from nowhere and accomplish nothing, or be so totally disgraced that it can't hurt you. And anyone who's led an interesting life is immediately disqualified and maybe achieved something. But I think there's also a bigger reason than that, and that is, maybe it's not the marketing, maybe it's the dog food. Politics is how we govern our governors, and the reason the government is not working all that well. It's a big, dumb industrial age institution when we're moving into the communications world. The things that people like and that are growing and are successful are Facebook, you know, and eBay, and big bottom-up structures. If we were inventing our government today, it would not look anything like what it looks like now. People do feel it is irresponsive, too big, too centralized. So we're watching, you know, Matthew's point that somehow these institutions have to change. The institutions have to change and become more responsive, and politics will reflect that at that point.
Well, Matthew's point, actually, your 2 points are kind of coincide with each other, because Matthew's point is that there's a lot of things going on at the grassroots level, at the local level, that offer hope and are models for progress. The question is how you tie that together, because the fact is we have to have a government. We're going to have a government, and how can government we've tried to do some of those things on education. I think there are a lot of opportunities there on a whole range of issues for bottom-up kinds of reforms, but that will make a difference.
I think that's a debate for the fall.
Yeah, yeah. Well, good. Well, I want to end by thanking Maria for hosting us and putting such a great evening together. I also want to say I'm fairly confident this will be the first, but not the last, of the Forums on the Road in California. And we look forward to our next visit with all of you. Please join me in thanking our outstanding panel. Have a safe drive home, and it should be an exciting year in politics and for this country. God bless.